In this video, we will analyze a summary of Metamorphoses, Book 1. Publius Ovidius Naso, also known as Ovid, was a Roman poet who lived from 43 BC to 17 CE. He was born in Salmo, Italy on March 20, 43 BCE. He died in Tomis, Moesia, and now Constanta, Romania in 17 CE. Ovid is considered one of the most influential poets in Western literary tradition. He wrote several significant works, including The Art of Love, The Heroines, The Art of Beauty, Metamorphoses, etc. Ovid is often ranked as one of the three canonical poets of Latin literature, along with Virgil and Horace. In fact, he was a younger contemporary of Virgil and Horace. Ovid's father took him and his brother to Rome to study so that they could become public speakers and politicians. Instead, Ovid used his rhetorical education in his poetic writing. Metamorphoses can refer to a biological process or a collection of mythical tales. Metamorphoses is an epic poem by Ovid that's almost 12,000 lines long. The poem is a collection of mythical tales based on the theme of change. The title Metamorphoses means transformations in Greek. The poem is composed in dactylic hexameter, same as the ancient Iliad and Odyssey, and the more contemporary epic Aeneid. Metamorphoses have influenced writers and artists throughout the centuries, including Shakespeare, Picasso, and Ted Hughes. Ovid's Metamorphoses is a 15-book epic poem with nearly 12,000 lines. The poem was written around 8 CE and is considered an important part of the classical canon. It contains over 250 Greek myths, each of which involves some kind of transformation for the characters. The poem is arranged loosely in the chronological order from the beginning of the universe's creation to the Augustan Rome of Ovid's own time. It traces the history of the world from its creation to the time of Julius Caesar. The title Metamorphoses can be translated as Books of Transformations. The poet starts his poem by his invocation to the gods. He asks for inspiration for his work, which begins with the creation of the world. Book 1 contains 10 chapters: the creation, the 4 ages, the giants, Lycaon, the flood, Deucalion and Pyrrha, Phaethon, Daphne, Io, and the first chapter of Phaethon. The first chapter is the creation. After a short prologue of prayer, Ovid describes the birth of the world. The poet begins saying that before the earth and the sea and heaven came into being, the whole nature displayed but one single face, which men called chaos. The Creator then severed the earth from heaven, sea from the land, and lighter air from the heavier air. He then made beings to inhabit these new spaces. Gods and stars filled the heavens, fish the seas, beasts the land, and the birds the air. The god in his wisdom ordained 5 separate zones to be traced on its surface. The central zone is too hot for men to inhabit. 2 zones are buried in the snow, and the other 2 zones are placed between those cold and hot zones, and thus he blended the heat with the cold in a temperate climate. The 4 ages. After the creation of the world, 4 ages followed: the Golden Age, the Silver Age, Age of Bronze, and finally Iron Age. The Golden Age was the time of trust, moral goodness, and fruitfulness. Everything was unscathed. Spring was the only season during Golden Age. Now, there followed the Age of Silver, when people had to work for their living. The Silver Age was meaner than the Golden Age, but higher in value in comparison to the Age of Bronze. The god divided the year into 4 new seasons: summer, changeable autumn, winter, and a short period of spring. The Age of Bronze saw the first wars, but some semblance of morality persisted still. This age was much crueler in nature and more ready to take up the menacing weapons But Age of Bronze still wasn't the wild to the core. The Age of Bronze was followed by the Iron Age. It was the final age. In this age, loyalty, truth, conscience went into exile, and those places were taken by guile, deception, treacherous plots, and criminal lust for possessions. In this age, men found the treasures which the god had hidden away in the home of the ghosts and by the river Styx. In a word, the Iron Age was the age of destruction. The story goes that the giants aspired to the throne of heaven and built a path to the stars by piling mountain on mountain. Then it was that almighty Jupiter who launched his lightning bolts to shatter Olympus and shook Mount Pelion down from its base on the ridges of Ossa mountain. As the story goes on, Mother Earth, now steeped and drenched in the blood of her own offspring, gave fresh life to the seething liquid of those giant bodies. She turned their blood into human forms, but the new race also looked on the gods with contempt. Lycaon. The chapter of Lycaon begins with the supreme god Jupiter, who has just called upon a general assembly for all the gods. In the cloudless skies, there is a path known for its brilliant whiteness. Men call this line Milky Way. This is the road which the gods must take to the almighty Thunderer's royal palace. As soon as all the gods are settled down to their seats, Jupiter proposes that now he will commit the whole race of mankind to destruction. The supreme god says he is forced to do it because of the infamous king Lycaon, the king of Arcadia. Jupiter says that he once made his descent from the heights of Olympus mountain and wandered over the earth as a disguised mortal. He entered the palace of King Lycaon and gave a sign that a god has just arrived. As a result, the people soon turned to their prayers, but King Lycaon started mocking them. He says he will settle if this person is god or mortal. Then Lycaon just applied his sword to the throat of one of the hostages and roasted his flesh, eventually set this repast on the table for Jupiter. At once Jupiter got furious and his lightning of vengeance struck. Lycaon's palace collapsed. Out of fear, Lycaon tried to flee, but Jupiter transformed him into a wolf. So, this was the cause behind Jupiter's decision to destroy the human race. He proposed his proposition and the gods clapped in approval. But some of them still murmured that the loss of human race will be widely deployed. They were worried about the fact that from now on, who will bring offerings to their altars? Jupiter promised to take care of the matter. He said he will breed a new race of miraculous birth, unlike the people before it. Lycaon's chapter ends here. The Flood. The Flood is the chapter of Jupiter's wrath. Out of his order, his brother Neptune, the sea god, deployed his waters upon the earth. So, as a result, the orchards, the crops, along with the cattle and people were swept to oblivion. The whole world was reduced to an ocean without any coastline. Wolves were swimming among the sheep. Lions and tigers are swept along in the flood. Deucalion and Pyrrha. A twin-peaked mountain called Parnassus was the only thing still towering its head to the cloud. Only this mountain was out of the consequence of the flood. Deucalion, with his wife Pyrrha, was sailing around this mountain. Point to be noted here that this Deucalion is the counterpart of Noah of Genesis. When Jupiter saw that the world was nothing but a pool of swirling water, and that only one of the 1,000 men and one of the 1,000 women are alive, who were both guileless of sin, he banished the storm clouds with the help of north wind. So the earth was again exposed to the sky, The earth rose up as the waves died down and dry land expanded. At the end of a long, long day, the tops of the trees began to be visible. The earth was restored, but when Deucalion saw it was empty, he burst into tears with his wife. He wished if he could use his father Prometheus' skill to create mankind once again and breathe new life into the molded clay. Deucalion went to the temple of Themis, the goddess of law, to seek help. The goddess gave them a way and they followed it. In this way, life was again descended on earth. So, at the time, straight after the flood, when the earth was muddy and heated again from above by the rays of the sun, it produced numerous species. Some of the forms was new and amazing in them. Amongst these forms was an unknown serpent, the monstrous Phaethon. The serpent horribly frightened the newborn people, but the Phoebus Apollo fixed it with his 1,000 deadly shafts. To remember his heroism, Apollo established the sacred game, attended by a huge crowd, and named it the Python Games. Daphne. Daphne was the first love of Apollo. The story behind Daphne and Apollo is quite interesting. It is interlinked with the chapter of Phaethon. So, Phoebus Apollo, still in the flush of his victory over the serpent, saw that the love god Cupid, son of Venus, is bending his bow and drawing the string. Neglectfully, Apollo addressed him, saying, "What are you doing with the grown-up weapons, you mischievous boy? That bow would better be carried by me." Apollo so arrogantly said that, and Cupid, out of his spiteful resentment, drew from his quiver 2 arrows of contrary purpose. One is for rousing passion, and the other one is meant to repel it. The former he shot at Apollo, and the latter was meant for Daphne, daughter of the river god Peneus. At once Apollo was filled with desire, but Daphne fled from that very thought of a lover. Daphne once proposed her father that she wants to remain a virgin like goddess Diana, but Apollo still chased her to propose his love for her. Daphne at once started fleeing from Apollo, but Apollo almost got in touch with her, but at that very moment Daphne prayed for help from her father. At once her father Peneus granted her the wish, and she became a laurel tree. But Apollo still loved her and promised her that she will always be in his head as his crown. The generals of Rome shall be wreathed with laurel leaves. Daphne agreed to this proposal of Apollo. Io. Io was the daughter of the river god Inachus. One day, when she was returning from her father, she caught the vision of Almighty Jupiter. Io tried to flee from that place, but Almighty Jupiter threw a mantle of darkness over the void earth. When Io didn't accept the proposal of Jupiter, the Almighty stealthily raped her. Meanwhile, Juno realized that the mists didn't come from the river. She noticed that it couldn't be due to the earth's moisture. She was quite aware of the amorous tricks of her husband. She thought either she was wrong or she was wronged. So she tried to pursue Jupiter. On the other hand, Jupiter, after anticipating Juno's presence, transformed Io into a white heifer. But Juno was still suspicious. She appointed Argus, the 100-eyed demon, to keep an eye on Io. Io's father Inachus was not aware that his daughter is still alive, but when Inachus came to know about her transformation, he lamented. Meanwhile, Argus had seen Io with Inachus, and he led Io to a more distant pasture. Almighty Jupiter could no longer bear the pain of his beloved Io, so he sent his son Mercury to a mission to finish Argus off. Mercury took the attire of a shepherd and came to Argus. He tried to put Argus to sleep, but Argus fought and resist the seduction. While some of his 100 eyes were put asleep, the other ones were kept awake. So Mercury made a plan to seduce him with a story. The story of Syrinx and Pan, much like Io and Jupiter. He started saying how the nymph Syrinx was pursued by Pan, the god of wild, and how she resisted against it. By the way, this story of Syrinx and Pan is an interlude section. However, while Mercury was telling this story, he noticed that Argus's eyes were shrouded in sleep. At once Mercury stopped talking and stroked Argus's dropping lids with his magic wand. In this way, Argus got finished. Now, it was the very time for Juno to get furious. She sent a demon to frighten the eyes of Io. Jupiter could bear no more. He drew Juno gently into his arms and asked her to punish Io no more. Jupiter told her that Io will never annoy her. Once Juno was placated, Io got her previous attire back. Phaethon, Chapter 1. Finally, Io gave birth to a son named Epiphus. Phaethon, the son of god Apollo and Clymene, was the peer rival of Epiphus. Once Epiphus went into a boastful argument with Phaethon. Epiphus told Phaethon that he is living with a false identity. He doubted Phaethon as the son of Apollo. As a result, Phaethon reported this insult to his mother Clymene. Clymene cleared his doubt that he really is the son of Phoebus Apollo. After getting aware of the truth, Phaethon excitedly hastened to the east to discover his father. This is not the end of Phaethon's chapter. The final chapter of Phaethon is included in Book 2.